solar panels are helping to transform lives at a Kenyan refugee camp. In America's coal country, experts turn old mines into carbon-sucking forests. And Angola makes history at the Amputee Football World Cup in Mexico. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. Tonight we begin in East Africa at Kenya's sprawling Kakuma refugee camp. When the sun sets, many activities at the camp come to an end because of electricity outages. But that is beginning to change as residents invest in solar panels. The panels have already transformed care at a health clinic in the camp, which houses 140,000 refugees from across the region. Mohammed Yusuf has our report.
1 year ago, this clinic in the Kakuma refugee camp was packed with patients, and most had to wait hours to see a doctor or nurse. That's because there wasn't a constant power supply. Healthcare providers say the unreliable power supply causes vaccines to spoil and staff to stop working when they are using essential medical and diagnostic devices. Now, with solar power panels installed, there are fewer patients waiting. The clinic can provide services more hours per day and treat the sick in a few minutes.
This solar installation has improved the services for us, especially in the lab. One, we can be able to store reagents here for lab equipment to be used during the time of examination. And we are also able to sustain a cold chain for immunization for children under 5.
Before solar power, the outlook for students who wanted to get an education looked bleak. However, the introduction of solar power energy in Kakuma is providing opportunities to students who want to further their studies.
In the camp, there is, after primary, secondary school, there is no chance maybe to go to do higher education. But if there is internet here, and then it helps us even open door for us to do further education and have chance at least to have more skills and do so many things.
According to aid agencies, authorities have long neglected refugee camps and rural areas. But a few companies like Bbox are venturing in to provide alternative energy sources.
Private sector is making them more and more affordable, and it's actually, they can provide better services than governments can provide. Instead of somebody living in a refugee camp or settlement waiting for the government to come and solve their problem, you can get 2 or 3 or 4 companies coming in offering you different solutions that you can pay for.
More than 80% of Kakuma's population still doesn't have access to clean, reliable energy, officials say. But that number is starting to shrink as solar panels gain in popularity. Mohammed Yusuf for VOA News, Kakuma, Kenya.
Libya could hold elections next spring, Italian Foreign Affairs Minister Enzo Movero said on Wednesday after Italy hosted a 2-day conference to try to stabilize the troubled North African country. Libyan commander Khalifa Haftar, a key player in the settlement in Libya, has committed himself to a United Nations action plan and to hold a national conference early next year prior to elections. A draft communique says Libyan delegations have agreed to prepare for the election by spring 2019 and abide by the results. A previous UN plan for elections in December was shelved last week. Libya's 2 main rival leaders were to met for the first time in more than 5 months. Well, here in Washington, Colonel Wolfgang Putztai, a policy and security analyst at the National Council on U.S.-Libya Relations, told viewers Mohammed al-Shinawi that there is no military solution to the Libyan crisis.
There is absolutely no way for a military solution. Any attempt, either by the Libyan National Army or by the other major Libyan military power, by the Misrata, to enforce such a solution would definitely end in chaos and would lead to a breakup of the country. I think it's necessary to engage much more with the major Libyan players, and Palermo could have been a good opportunity for a starting point. But for various reasons, General Haftar decided not to go to Palermo, to the main meeting. I think one of the reasons was that he doesn't want to give the Italians a success.
Well, that was Colonel Wolfgang Putztai, a policy and security analyst at the National Council on U.S.-Libya Relations. Well, migrants refusing to leave a cargo ship docked in Libya say they would rather die than be returned to land. On Wednesday, the Coast Guard began disembarking some of those on board. In the first documented case of its kind, the migrants have been stranded on the ship since it intercepted them off Libya's western coast on Saturday and brought them to the port of Misrata. Meanwhile, a group of 51 refugees who were evacuated from Libya by the UN Refugee Agency arrived in Italy on Wednesday. The refugees are considered extremely vulnerable by UNHCR, which means they qualified for resettlement under a new international initiative. After evacuation from Tripoli, the Libyan capital, they were further processed in Niger before this flight to Italy, where they have been granted asylum. There are hundreds of thousands of primarily sub-Saharan African migrants in Libya. Many experience dire conditions and abuse, including forced labor and torture in Libya. The overturning of a Christian woman's blasphemy conviction in Pakistan, sparing her life, is focusing new attention on blasphemy laws. As viewers Robert Raphael explains, variations of such laws are challenging global efforts to ensure human rights and free speech.
Angry protests rose up across Pakistan 2 weeks ago when the nation's Supreme Court reversed the 2010 guilty verdict of Asia Bibi. The Pakistani Christian woman faced death by hanging for her conviction for insulting the Prophet Muhammad. Upon the court's decision, the Islamist party TLP passed an edict, including a declaration condemning the justices to death. Pakistan's prime minister denounced the group's statements, but Islamabad later reached a deal with TLP that included legally blocking Bibi from leaving the country. Pakistan is holding Bibi at a secret location. Human rights activists condemned the deal. Omar Warish is with Amnesty International.
What is really interesting is that the Supreme Court has upheld and said that someone has been acquitted, that these charges were false. The test is whether the government can implement that Supreme Court order, protect the judges, and protect Asia Bibi.
The U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom says blasphemy is considered a criminal act in 71 nations, including 6 where it is punishable by death. Gary Bauer is with that commission.
In the Middle East, these laws are being enforced often in a way that not only violates the religious liberty of religious minorities, but, as I mentioned, is used to get even with people or to harass people or to make people limit their freedom of speech.
Bauer says the U.S. and other nations cannot allow regional security concerns to mute their support for religious freedom. Robert Raphael, VOA News.
Well, although the U.S. midterm elections were held last week, the Democrats are adding another seat to their majority in the House of Representatives. Political novice Andy Kim was declared the winner Wednesday in New Jersey's 3rd Congressional District, defeating the incumbent Republican Tom MacArthur. Kim was a national security aide in the Obama administration. Kim's Korean heritage makes him New Jersey's first Asian American congressman. Meanwhile, votes are still being counted more than a week after midterm elections for the House and Senate. It appears Republicans might add 3 or 4 seats to their current 51 to 49 Senate majority. Well, I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Find me on Twitter at viewer Vince McCory. Still ahead on Africa 54, Africa wins big at the Amputee Football World Cup. But first, a look at Thursday's headlines.
In Ethiopia, more than 60 senior security officials arrested on suspected human rights abuses and corruption in a move broadly welcomed by rights groups and opposition politicians. In Sudan, people stand in line at banks as cash shortages ripple throughout the country as high inflation and economic unrest deepen. In the United States, the UN Security Council lifts sanctions on Eritrea following a landmark peace deal with Ethiopia and a thaw with Djibouti A group of 51 Nigerian refugees are evacuated from Libya to Italy by the UNHCR as part of an operation to get vulnerable refugees out of the country. The Constitutional Court of Gabon, whose head of state has been hospitalized for 3 weeks, authorizes the vice president to chair a ministerial council to deal with the prime minister's agenda.
What dramatic steps are needed to avoid potentially catastrophic levels of global warming, according to the latest report from the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Experts say nature provides some of the best ways to pull planet-warming carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. Restoring forests is one route. In West Virginia, where strip mines have scarred the earth, experts are working to bring back the forests that once covered vast parcels of the Appalachian Mountains. Here's VOA Steve Baragona.
Deep within West Virginia's Monongahela National Forest lies a rare stand of virgin woods.
Living in the East, there's not many places that you can go and be untouched by man.
Shane Jones is a biologist with the U.S. Forest Service. He says a mapping mistake spared these trees when the surrounding forest was logged decades ago. That's good, because red spruce forests like this one excel at taking planet-warming carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and locking it away in the soil.
See all that organic material? It's black because it's incredibly high in carbon.
The mountains of Appalachia have lost 90% of their red spruce forests to logging and coal mining. Burning that coal for energy is adding more and more carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. As the planet warms, scientists say the need for forests to remove that CO2 is increasingly urgent. The University of Kentucky's Chris Barton says tropical rainforests get the most attention.
But here in the temperate region of the world, in Appalachia, 4 hours away from Washington, D.C., we have billions of trees that potentially we could be planting.
Where better, Barton says, than here on the remains of old strip mines? That's one reason Barton started a group called Green Forests Work, to put trees back on the roughly 400,000 hectares of Appalachian forests that have been strip mined away. But there's a problem with many of these lands.
If you went out and planted trees on these sites, they just didn't grow. The ground was way too, compacted. Water didn't infiltrate, roots can't penetrate, oxygen can't circulate in those environments.
The solution looks more like a Game of Thrones battleground than a forest in the making. Ripping up the compacted ground will let the trees they plant put down roots. Barton says it's not always easy to convince people it's a good idea.
We've had a lot of people kind of look at us twice. But it's the really interesting thing about it is after we do it, there's no question that that was the right thing to do.
They're starting to see results. Forests are coming back on the grounds they've ripped up and replanted. In West Virginia alone, restoring red spruce to its old habitat could lock up the equivalent of 56 million barrels of oil, scientists say. But not right away. It will take decades. Shane Jones says patience is key.
It's really awesome to see a tree planted 8 years ago that's now waist high, but at the end of the day, at the end of my day, we're barely getting started because our main goal with the restoration work that we do here is to basically take actions to then let nature take over.
Around the world, experts say, nature offers powerful tools to fight climate change. Nature works slowly, they say, but it works. Steve Baragona, VOA News, Elkins, West Virginia.
Aquaculture is the world's fastest growing food industry. It now accounts for over 50% of the total global seafood supply, according to the World Economic Forum. But farming fish requires food for those fish, and currently it relies on a lot of ingredients that could be feeding people, including soybean, corn, rice, and wheat. VOA's Faith Lapidus reports on some new sustainable ideas about feeding farmed fish from Norway.
Norway is one of the top 10 aquaculture producers, and the industry goes to great lengths to secure feed for farmed fish. It has even sent factory ships to the other end of the earth to vacuum krill, tiny crustaceans eaten by penguins and whales, from Antarctic waters. But a couple of Norwegian companies are looking a little closer to home. An Institute of Marine Research team believes insects are the perfect candidate to replace traditional fish meal.
Insects are so great because they can actually eat what we can't eat, right? So you can use organic side streams out of the food industry, for example, things that can't be used for animal feed directly, or it can't be used for human consumption. You can feed them to insects, and they eat it and convert it into protein, fat, like really high quality products.
Mealworms are never happier than when munching their way through the kind of food that would make most people retch. The Aquafly project team also turned to the ocean for ingredients.
We fed kelp to the insects, and we saw that by using kelp to grow insects, we could have higher amounts of omega-3 in the larvae, as well as vitamin E, iodine, all these good things that come from the marine environment in the product. And then we use this further into fish feed.
The startup CO2 Bio is also looking at an aquatic plant as fish feed. It's using carbon dioxide captured from the nation's largest oil refinery to nourish the growth of algae in a greenhouse.
We take the CO2 from the refinery, we are at the test center, and use that for production of algae and biomass to produce omega-3 acid for the fish industry. And that shall be food for the fish and later on for the people.
The transparent tubes filled with warm seawater provide ideal conditions for algae to turn the gas into food using the same process of photosynthesis as other plants. The algae is harvested, dried, and processed. And like mealworms, algae can also grow with a diet of waste products.
For example, the leftover products from aquaculture, as the poo of the fish or fish blood, and as well for municipality waste, organic liquids. Yeah, it's making it a lot more sustainable if we manage actually to replace the pure chemicals that we need with those waste streams as nutrients.
The alternative food stocks could reduce the amount of wild-caught fish needed to make fish feed, transforming an industry with a vital role in feeding the world's growing population. I'm Faith Lapidus, VOA News.
Well, African teams joined the Amputee Football World Cup in Mexico, with one of the continent's squads taking top honors. Stefan Lofgren reports.
For the first time ever, an African team has won football's biggest prize, the World Cup. The Amputee Football World Cup, that is. The recently concluded tournament, which was held in the Mexican town of San Juan de los Lagos, saw Angola beating Turkey in a dramatic final that had to be settled by penalty shootout. It was sweet revenge for the Angolans, who surprisingly reached the final of the last World Cup in 2014, only to then lose to Russia. Striker João Chiquete said the victory did not belong to just him or his team.
I'm not here just for me. I'm here for Angola. I'm here for Africa.
Amputee football, which is a seven-a-side game, has grown in popularity in recent years, with dozens of new countries around the world taking up the sport. Yet in most of Africa, amputee football has struggled to gain official support. Ghana and Liberia, two of the 5 African countries scheduled to take part in this year's World Cup, were forced to pull out because of financial difficulties. The Kenyan team, meanwhile, had to abandon plans for a pre-tournament training camp when government funding failed to materialize.
In the end, they said, we will only provide you with air tickets. We didn't have any kits. The jersey I'm wearing right now is not a national team jersey. This is a Nairobi club, football club jersey. You know, it's not the national colors.
It was a similar story for the Nigerian team, which made its World Cup debut after missing out on 3 previous tournaments for financial reasons. With private funding arriving late, the Nigerian delegation had to be substantially trimmed, and most of the players only arrived on the day of their opening match after a grueling 55-hour journey to Mexico. Not surprisingly, the game against Brazil ended in a crushing defeat for the Nigerians. Still, the Nigerian team rebounded and made history by recording its first ever World Cup win against El Salvador, a previous tournament winner. Defender Sarafadin Olelekan Oyeleke says the future of amputee football in Nigeria is strong if the sport receives more support.
We have a lot of amputees in Nigeria. Let's see how we can engage them. Let's see how we can have leagues also in Nigeria. The government needs to come in, private organization. We need everybody around this.
The Kenyan captain, Dalmas Otieno, says more exposure for the sport will lead to changing attitudes about people with disabilities in Africa, who are often stigmatized at home.
We should try and expose this game in the grassroots. Let's take it into the villages. Let people get to know about this sport. I think we can create awareness and people will have a positive look or perspective with amputee people.
The next Amputee Football World Cup will be held in Costa Rica in 2022. By then, organizers also hope to hold the first Amputee Football World Cup for women. This is Stefan Lofgren for VOA in San Juan de los Lagos, Mexico.
Welcome back to Africa 54, and here's what's trending. Researchers at German engineering firm Siemens have devised a method to illustrate fan energy during soccer matches by capturing a stadium's acoustics. Siemens says its systems can pinpoint the most important fans during the course of a soccer match for the first time and show the off-pitch atmosphere in the stadium. At the same time, the collected data shows which player was supported the most by the fans, allowing for a completely new conversation of the post-game analysis. Siemens thinks its fans can see the effect of their own efforts on their on-pitch heroes, effectively making themselves the effective 12th man of soccer folklore. They might sit up and notice and shout that bit louder when watching their team. Well, next up, mountain gorillas live in forests along a range of dormant volcanoes in East Africa. Researchers had projected that the primates may be extinct by 2000. Instead, their populations have been slowly increasing thanks to international conservation efforts. The Switzerland-based International Union for Conservation of Nature updated mountain gorilla status from critically endangered to endangered, a more promising, if still precarious, designation. There are now just over 1,000 of the animals in the wild. Tourism is helping. Visitors pay up to $1,500 an hour to watch gorillas, money that helps pay for park rangers. The gorillas' habitat falls inside the national parks spanning parts of Rwanda, Uganda, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Well, and finally, Nepal's first robot waiter, Ginger, is serving hungry customers. The poor Himalayan nation is better known for its soaring mountain peaks than technological prowess. But a group of self-taught young innovators are seeking to change that. The humanoid robot can even crack jokes like Apple's Siri or Amazon's Alexa. What Nepal lacks in tech infrastructure, the engineers made up for in ingenuity. Ginger's slick-looking plastic body was painted in a neighborhood car workshop. With its eyes on the global market, Ginger's creators are in the process of patenting its design to sell it at home and abroad. Now, the World Economic Forum recently predicted that by 2025, more than half of all jobs will be performed by robots, almost twice as many as today. And that's what's trending today. Now, if you are really fortunate and live in the U.S. cities of Houston, Indianapolis, Los Angeles, or Sacramento, you now have access to a 5G network. If you live anywhere else, just be patient. A 5G mobile phone network is coming your way, and it's already arriving in some countries. Here's viewers Kevin Enox.
In the tiny state of Monaco, on the Mediterranean Riviera, the future has arrived. These antennas are upgrades that will allow Monaco to handle the increased demands that 5G devices will put on networks.
We are in the
process of installing the antennas on pretty much all the roofs because the aim is to cover the whole of Monaco. It is the antennas you can see behind me that we're in the process of installing, and they will allow us to cover the whole principality, to have coverage everywhere inside.
What is a 5G network? Without getting too deep into jargon, it will give your wireless device the ability to do a lot more of whatever you do online, and do it faster and more efficiently.
La 5G, c'est 10 fois plus de puissance.
5G is 10 times stronger, so that allows us to provide coverage for all multimedia uses for the many more people who will be connected. 5G reduces the connection wait by 10 times, and therefore we can connect immediately, and that is essential for new uses such as connected cars. And 5G also allows at least 10 times as many connections per square meter, and that is a very important factor in the technological revolution.
But the networks they need to work on haven't quite caught up yet. Experts say as our lives, our homes, and our cars become increasingly wired, we're going to need all that new bandwidth. A few U.S. cities have pockets of 5G, but don't expect the speedy new services to really get rolling until the end of next year or even into 2020. Besides Monaco, it's no surprise that the countries that are most likely to roll out 5G first are South Korea, China, Japan, and the United States. Kevin Enochs, VOA News.
Well, that's our show for today. Now be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC. That's Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching from all of us in Washington. Have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. Canaries are little yellow birds.
Canary in a coal mine.
Why are these cute birds in a dark coal mine?
Did you hear about Sarah? The boss took her to dinner and then fired her the next day.
The same thing happened to Jason. The boss took him to dinner and then fired him.
Dinner with the boss